Boring wins here. If you came for one magical exercise that melts the fat around your organs, this is not that video. Walking has a job. Strength training has a different job. After 60, asking one to do the other's work can leave you lighter but less protected. Picture a blank weekly calendar on your kitchen table. A few boxes will turn blue. A few will turn gold. One stays white. Before I fill them in, you need to see why the word best has been making this decision harder than it should be. The answer is buried inside a study that seems to rank your choices until you read what it actually found. You may already walk before breakfast. The kettle clicks off, your shoes go on, and the street is still quiet. You return warm and clear-headed. That is a real win. But the belt may still press at the same hole. Or perhaps you chose the weight room instead. Your grip improved. The grocery bags feel easier, yet your waist seems unmoved. Someone like you can be doing the hard part faithfully and still be measuring the wrong result from the wrong tool. That is not failure. It is a job assignment problem. Keep that paper calendar in mind, because one empty box will explain why a good routine can look complete while leaving its most important promise unfinished. The evidence is unusually useful here because it is mixed in the right way. It includes human randomized trials and large meta-analyses that combine many trials. One 2024 network meta-analysis in obesity reviews pulled together 84 randomized trials involving 4,836 people with overweight or obesity. Aerobic exercise, resistance training, combined training, and interval training all reduced visceral fat, which is the fat stored around the organs. But vigorous aerobic exercise and interval work ranked highest across several fat outcomes. Resistance training alone ranked last for visceral fat. That sounds like a verdict against lifting. It is not. It is the first clue that the tools have different jobs. I need to correct the promise before we go further. A ranking is not a finish line. It tells you which option had the highest probability of leading a particular outcome across those trials. It does not tell you that the last option did nothing. In that same review, every training category helped reduce visceral fat. So the upgraded promise is more useful than which exercise wins. I will show you which tool targets organ fat more directly, which tool protects the tissue you cannot afford to lose, and why the best answer after 60 is often neither walking alone nor weights alone. The calendar will make that answer visible. The expected villain is laziness. That explanation falls apart the moment you look at someone walking daily or lifting regularly. The real problem is narrower. Your body is being asked to do two jobs with one tool. Think of a pantry inside a small house. Aerobic work helps empty what is stored. Strength work helps keep the shelves sturdy enough to hold what the house needs. If you only empty the pantry, you may remove useful structure with the surplus. If you only brace the shelves, the pantry may empty more slowly. The fat around the organs is the crowded back room. The goal is not merely a lighter house. The goal is a safer room with strong shelves. That image matters because body weight hides location. A bathroom scale can tell you the total load. It cannot tell you whether change came from visceral fat, fat under the skin, water, or muscle. A tape around the waist gives another clue, but it still cannot look inside the body. In research, visceral fat is often measured with imaging that can separate those storage areas. At home, your practical tools are simpler. You can track your weekly aerobic minutes, your resistance sessions, and whether the routine survives ordinary life. None of those proves how much visceral fat you lost. Together, they reveal whether you are actually running both jobs. Now, follow the cycle. You diet harder, which lowers the energy coming into the house, which may reduce body fat, which can make the scale reward you, while a missing strength signal allows muscle to slip away unnoticed. Less muscle can make ordinary tasks feel more expensive, so movement gets easier to skip, which weakens the routine that was supposed to protect you. The scale shows a smaller number. The house shows thinner shelves. This is why a single successful signal can conceal an incomplete outcome. The same calendar that records effort can expose the missing job, but only after you know what each color is meant to protect. You can perform the first audit now. Look back over the most recent week that felt normal. Count minutes of brisk walking or other aerobic movement. Then mark every day that included full body resistance work. Do not grade yourself. Do not estimate calories. Just count what happened. The useful aerobic reference in the facts file is 150 minutes a week at moderate to vigorous intensity, with reductions continuing in a straight line up to 300 minutes in the research. That range is a map, not a diagnosis. Your home count shows behavior. It does not measure organ fat. Still, it gives you the first honest view of which job has been left blank. The number behind that map comes from a 2024 dose-response meta-analysis in JAMA Network Open. Across 116 randomized trials and 6,880 adults with overweight or obesity, each additional 30 minutes of aerobic exercise per week was associated with reductions in body weight, waist size, body fat percentage, visceral fat area, and fat under the skin. The relationship stayed linear up to 300 minutes a week, and 150 minutes at moderate to vigorous intensity produced clinically important changes in waist size and body fat. More weekly movement created more opportunity to empty the pantry. The dose had a direction. That does not mean you should leap from a quiet week into vigorous sessions. The highest-ranked arms in the other review were tested largely in adults with overweight or obesity, not specifically in people over 60. If you have been sedentary, build intensity gradually. If you have a heart or joint condition, clear vigorous or interval work with your own clinician first. The destination matters, but the entry ramp matters too. Walking can supply a large share of the aerobic work when the pace makes breathing noticeably stronger. The honest question is not whether walking counts. It is whether your walking supplies enough of the job you assign to it. Almost nobody explains the other half with equal care. A 2022 sports medicine meta-analysis examined full-body resistance training in healthy adults. It included 58 studies, with 54 entering the meta-analysis. Resistance training reduced body fat percentage by 1.46%, fat mass by 0.55 kilograms, and visceral fat by a standardized mean difference of 0.49. Training volume and the individual training components did not predict the size of the effect, so lifting was not useless for fat. It was modest and variable. The strongest reason to keep it after 60 appears when the outcome changes from fat alone to body composition, meaning fat and lean tissue considered together. Return to the paper on the kitchen table. One set of boxes tracks movement that keeps drawing from stored energy. Another tracks work that tells muscle it is still needed. If the first set is full and the second empty, the routine can shrink the pantry while weakening the shelves. If the second is full and the first nearly empty, the shelves get attention while the crowded room changes more slowly. Both patterns can feel disciplined. Both can produce a genuine benefit. Neither completes the whole job. This is the first loop closing. Walking and strength are not rival candidates for one vacancy. They are applicants for different positions. The audience-specific cost appears in a 2023 Advances in Nutrition review. Researchers examined 92 studies and 66 studies with 4,957 participants aged 55 to 70, entered a network meta-analysis covering 12 intervention groups. Energy restriction combined with exercise reduced body fat. Energy restriction alone was less effective and tended to decrease muscle mass. Exercise generally preserved muscle, but only mixed exercise significantly increased it. The most effective approaches across nearly all outcomes combined: energy restriction with resistance training or mixed exercise and high protein. For people near retirement age, losing weight without protecting muscle can create sarcopenic obesity, which means too little muscle alongside excess fat. Fat loss alone is incomplete. Notice the vindication inside that finding. If you walked, ate less, saw the scale fall, and still felt physically less capable, the problem was not weak character. Your plan may have rewarded the visible number, while neglecting the tissue that carries shopping, steadies a stumble, and gets you up from a low chair. Aerobic work and food changes can lower fat. Resistance gives muscle a reason to stay. Mixed exercise can do both jobs at once. You do not need to fear the pantry. You need to protect the shelves while the pantry changes. That is the spine of the whole answer, and it is why the late reveal will be about distribution across the week. Imagine an ordinary week. On one branch, you walk briskly on several mornings, lift on separate days, and keep returning after the first burst of motivation fades. On the other branch, you take a gentle stroll when weather allows, avoid resistance because it feels unfamiliar, and try to make up the difference by eating less. The first branch gives both jobs a repeated signal. The second may still help mood, mobility, and energy use, but it leaves muscle protection to chance. One quiet week proves nothing. A repeated pattern becomes your actual program. The research does not grade your intentions. It records what your body repeatedly receives. There is a second branch too. You may love strength training. You move carefully through squats to a chair, rows, presses, and carries. You feel stronger, so the routine is working. But if nearly all movement between sessions is seated, asking the lifting alone to lead visceral fat change gives it the job that ranked last in the 84 trial comparison. That ranking does not insult strength work, it defines its limit. A hammer remains valuable after you learn it is not a saw. The wrong conclusion is to throw the hammer away. The right conclusion is to stop asking it to cut the board. That leaves the obvious fix, and it is not do everything every day. A routine that collapses under its own weight is not a complete routine. The 2-year head-to-head trial will make that painfully clear later. For now, the partial answer has 3 shapes. You need a weekly amount for aerobic work. You need a place for resistance work. You need a continuity rule that survives missed days, travel, sore joints, and busy weeks. The values are still withheld because one popular ranking must be audited first. Then the paper calendar gets its colors, its blank square, and its name. Boring wins here. The first act showed the cost of treating walking and strength as substitutes. The next act follows the paper trail behind the word last. That single word is accurate inside a narrow ranking, but misleading when it becomes a complete recommendation for life after 60. Keep 3 things open in your mind. What did the ranked review actually compare? What changed when exercise continued for months? And what failed when people could not keep the plan going? Those answers will decide the 3 parts of the routine. One of them is not an exercise at all. The paper trail starts with a fair claim. In the 2024 network meta-analysis, vigorous aerobic exercise and interval work had the highest probability of being best for visceral fat and several related outcomes. Resistance training ranked least effective. The researchers included resistance because it did reduce visceral fat across the whole network. They separated training types because different programs could produce different results. They also reported subgroup findings because averages can hide who responds. Those are strengths. The trouble begins only when a ranking for one outcome gets flattened into a verdict on the value of an exercise. The paper ranked fat outcomes. Your life also depends on muscle. 3 details change the headline. First, the population was people with overweight or obesity, not a study built only around adults over 60. Second, the outcome was visceral fat and related fat measures, not the full job of preserving muscle while fat changes. Third, resistance training still helped overall, even though it ranked last. Read the word again in its proper place. Last in a comparison is not the same as useless. It is one runner crossing behind others, not one runner staying home. The transmission chain kept the rank because ranks travel easily. It often dropped the outcome because outcomes take longer to explain. This is not academic fussiness. It changes the choice you make tomorrow morning. If your only goal were the probability of reducing visceral fat, the ranking points toward aerobic or interval work. If your goal after 60 includes holding muscle, the relevant evidence expands. The 2023 analysis of postmenopausal women covered 101 studies and 5,697 participants. Across that evidence, aerobic and combined training had greater effects on fat mass outcomes. Resistance and combined training had greater effects on muscle mass outcomes. Only one option appears on both sides of that sentence. Combined training. Empty the pantry. Brace the shelves. Best case, aerobic work supplies more of the fat loss job, while strength work supplies more of the muscle job. Worst case, one tool is chosen because a headline called it the winner, while the other job disappears from the plan. The mechanism is not mysterious. Repeated aerobic movement raises energy demand during the week. Repeated resistance asks muscle to produce force, which gives that tissue a reason to remain useful. A ranking made the story portable. It did not make the story complete. No one hid the second half. A single winner simply fits more neatly on a thumbnail than two tools with separate duties. Look at the calendar again. The blue boxes are becoming easier to guess. They represent the aerobic work that draws on stored energy over time. The gold boxes protect a different asset, but the uncolored box still matters more than it looks. It represents what happens after the planned week's end. A 2023 randomized trial makes that box impossible to ignore. The trial placed 144 untrained adults into vigorous combined exercise, moderate combined exercise, or no exercise for 24 weeks. Both exercise groups lowered body weight, fat mass, and visceral fat mass similarly. Intensity did not decide the result. Continued participation did. Then the researchers watched what happened in free living. After a 10-month period without the organized program, body weight, fat mass, and visceral fat mass returned to baseline in both exercise groups. Moderate had worked. Vigorous had worked. Neither left a permanent receipt after the routine disappeared. This is the authority couplet for the act. The program changed the body while it was present. The body drifted back when the program was absent. A harder burst did not buy immunity from continuity. The routine was effective, but the effect still needed a home in ordinary life. That finding removes a seductive mistake. You cannot bank a season of punishment and spend the results forever. Exercise is closer to brushing your teeth than renovating a room once. The action keeps doing its job because it keeps appearing. This is why the third protocol component is not a harder interval, a heavier dumbbell, or a more impressive tracker. It is a rule for continuing. The paper calendar is not merely a record of perfect weeks. It must also tell you what to do after a missed day. The blank square will become that rule. Now consider the longest direct contest. A 2024 randomized trial assigned 239 people with abdominal obesity to strength training or endurance training, alongside standard nutrition counseling. The sessions were designed for 2 to 3 times a week, 60 minutes per session, across 24 months. At 12 and 24 months, visceral fat volume did not differ between the two groups. Neither approach moved it much overall. The striking number was not the comparison between exercises. Good training adherence was only 30% at 12 months, while retention was about 50%. Among those who adhered well, both programs showed a trend toward lower visceral fat. Adherence swallowed the contest. That trial does not prove the exercises were equal in every person. It proves that a program on paper and a program performed are different exposures. 2 to 3 60-minute sessions can sound tidy in a methods section. In real life, travel happens, joints complain, family needs you, and a missed week becomes a stopped month. This is a safety point as well as an adherence point. If a condition, medication, heart concern, or joint problem changes what you can do, your clinician should help set the starting level. A plan that respects your body can keep running. A plan that ignores it often becomes the blank square. Before I show you the 3-part answer, choose the tool you expected to win. Drop the number of the one you are most tempted to try first. Walking is 1. Strength is 2. Both is 3. Keep your answer there, even if it changes by the end. The point is not to catch you being wrong. It is to show how the question itself changes once fat and muscle sit on the same page. Almost nobody explains that the correct choice depends on which tissue you are trying to change and which tissue you refuse to sacrifice. Intensity is the second pillar that sounds more precise than it is. The 84 trial review ranked vigorous aerobic and interval work highly, but a separate 2018 sports medicine meta-analysis of interval training combined 39 studies with 617 participants, whose mean age was 38.8 years. Interval training reduced total, abdominal, and visceral fat. Running outperformed cycling for total and visceral fat, yet the intensity pattern split. Work above 90% of peak heart rate was more successful for whole body fat, while lower intensities had a greater effect on abdominal and visceral fat. The hardest setting did not own every outcome. That result deserves respect and restraint. The analysis was not built around previously sedentary adults over 60. Interval work above 90% of peak heart rate is not the starting point for that viewer. The abdominal fat benefit in the analysis sat at lower intensities anyway. So harder always wins is false precision. Your body does not read the bright number on a machine and award one universal prize. Different outcomes respond differently, and the safest useful intensity is personal. If brisk walking challenges you today, brisk walking is not a lesser moral choice. It is a starting exposure you may be able to repeat. The measurement details add another warning. In that interval meta-analysis, significant abdominal or visceral fat loss appeared only when researchers used CT or MRI imaging. Those scans can distinguish internal storage more directly than a scale or tape. Your bathroom scale cannot do that. Your watch cannot do that. Your sweat cannot do that. This does not make home tracking worthless. It gives each instrument an honest job. The watch records behavior. The scale records mass. Imaging records location. Confusing those jobs is the same mistake as confusing walking with strength work. Precision starts by naming what a tool can actually see. The real safety group is not rhetorical. It includes the person returning from years of little activity, the person with a heart condition, the person whose knees change the available movements, and the person whose medication or condition makes a sudden training jump unwise. These are not decorative cautions. Build intensity gradually, and ask your doctor about vigorous or interval work when existing heart or joint conditions are part of the picture. Resistance work also needs an entry point you can control with sound form. The aim is repeatable training, not a dramatic first week. Safe enough to continue beats, impressive enough to abandon. My short confession is simple. I can tell you whether a 30-minute walk felt satisfying, but I cannot tell you from that feeling whether the whole week met the job. One good mark on a calendar can become permission to stop counting. That was the ordinary failure image I kept missing. A checked box felt like a finished system. It was only one exposure. The open question remains: how do you turn useful exposures into a week that protects both tissues and survives interruption? The answer is coming next. It is built around minutes, modes, and a return rule. You can verify the missing variable yourself. Search the way exercise choices are usually presented, and count how often the advice names visceral fat change, muscle protection, and continuity in the same frame. The absence is not a conspiracy. One winner is easier to headline. One dramatic workout is easier to demonstrate. A return rule is quiet. Quiet does not make it weak. Boring wins here. The protocol is called the two-job week. Its three parts are the aerobic base, the strength anchor, and the return rule. But one mistake can cancel the design even when every part appears on your calendar. Boring wins here. Notice one thing as the protocol unfolds. None of it asks you to do more of the same exercise simply because that exercise feels familiar. The two-job week has two physical categories and one behavior rule. The categories: empty the pantry and brace the shelves. The rule keeps the house from drifting back after the program feeling wears off. The three nouns are aerobic base, strength anchor, and return rule. For each one, I will give you the number the evidence supports, the source behind it, and the reason it belongs. When the evidence does not support a universal number, I will say so. A protocol without honesty is just packaging. Component 1 is the aerobic base. This is a range, not a magic threshold. The research supports 150 to 300 minutes a week of moderate to vigorous aerobic exercise for meaningful changes in waist size and body fat, with the measured relationship continuing across that range. At the lower end, you have reached the amount associated with clinically important change in the 2024 dose-response review. At the upper end, the linear pattern in that evidence had not yet flattened. The unit is minutes per week. It is not steps, miles, sweat, or calories shown on a watch. Minutes are the behavior you can count without pretending your device can see visceral fat. The same review gives two honest reference points. At 150 minutes a week, moderate to vigorous aerobic work was linked with clinically important reductions in waist circumference and body fat. At 300 minutes, the dose-response pattern was still linear. Between those points, each extra 30 minutes per week was associated with a 0.56 centimeter reduction in waist size and a 1.60 square centimeter reduction in visceral fat area across the trials. Those are study averages, not promises for your body. The useful translation is simpler. More repeatable aerobic minutes tended to move the fat outcomes farther. The pantry needs regular emptying. Walking can fill the aerobic base if the effort reaches a moderate level for you. The facts file does not give a home test for that level, so I will not invent one. Use a clinician's guidance when your health makes intensity uncertain. You can also use other aerobic modes that fit your joints and balance. The evidence compared categories, not moral worth. If interval training appeals to you, remember that its 2018 evidence came from a much younger group on average, and the lower intensities did better for abdominal and visceral fat than the work above 90% of peak heart rate. Harder is optional. Repeatable is essential. Your first practical move is to total the minutes you already do in a normal week. If the total sits below 150, the gap is information, not a verdict. Build toward the range gradually. If you already sit inside 150 to 300, do not assume more intensity automatically solves the remaining problem. Check the next component. If you have been sedentary, or you manage a heart or joint condition, ask your clinician how to enter the range safely. Aerobic exercise can lead the visceral fat job, but it should not be forced to carry the muscle job too. The base empties the pantry. Component 2 is the strength anchor. This one does not come with an honest universal dose from the supplied evidence. That matters. The 2022 resistance training meta-analysis included full-body programs lasting at least 4 weeks, and it found modest reductions in body fat and visceral fat. Yet training volume and individual program components did not explain the size of the effect. The 2-year comparison tested 2 to 3 60-minute sessions each week, but low adherence kept the overall result small. I could turn those designs into a confident prescription. The evidence would not justify it. The number belongs to the study. Your starting dose belongs in a plan fitted to your ability. What the evidence does support is the presence of resistance work. In postmenopausal women, resistance and combined training had greater benefits for muscle mass outcomes. In adults aged 55 to 70, exercise preserved muscle, while only mixed exercise significantly increased it in the network comparison. That is the objection killer for anyone who thinks strength work can be discarded because it ranked last for visceral fat, last for one fat outcome, essential to the other job. The pantry can look better while the shelves weaken. Strength work helps stop that trade from happening unseen. Make the anchor full body, because that is the form described in the resistance evidence. The exact exercises depend on what you can perform safely. A chair movement, a pull, a press, and a carry are practical categories, but they are not a medical prescription. If joint pain, balance, a condition, or medication changes what is safe, a clinician or qualified professional should fit the movements to you. Start with control you can repeat. Strength is not proved by soreness. It is shown when ordinary force becomes more available and the practice can return without fear. This is where the calendar's gold marks earn their place. They do not compete with the blue minutes. They answer a question the blue minutes cannot answer alone. Are you giving muscle a reason to remain while you work on fat? The 2023 evidence near retirement age makes that distinction concrete. Energy restriction alone tended to reduce muscle. Exercise preserved it. Mixed exercise was the only category that significantly increased it. Therefore, the strength anchor is not a consolation prize. It is the protection that keeps a fat loss plan from quietly becoming a muscle loss plan. The anchor braces the shelves. Component 3 is the return rule. Its complication is that success during a program is not the same as success after the program. The 24-week combined training trial showed similar improvements with moderate and vigorous work. After the 10-month free living period, the measured body weight, fat mass, and visceral fat mass returned to baseline in both exercise groups. The lesson is not that exercise fails. The lesson is that completed exercise stops being current exposure. Your return rule decides what happens after illness, travel, weather, or a crowded family week interrupts the pattern. The return rule is deliberately plain. Do not repay missed exercise by cramming it into one punishing session. Resume the aerobic base and strength anchor at a level you can safely repeat. If an illness or injury caused the break, let your clinician guide the return. This rule protects continuity from perfection. It also answers the adherence problem in the 2-year trial. A program designed for 2 to 3 60-minute sessions did little overall when good adherence reached only 30% at 12 months. The plan that exists on paper cannot outrun the plan that disappears in practice. Return beats repayment. Now name the image. The sheet on your kitchen table is the 2-job calendar. Blue records the aerobic base. Gold records the strength anchor. The white box is not a rest day chosen by a universal schedule. It is the return rule, kept visible so a disrupted week has a way back. A perfect calendar is not the target. A recoverable calendar is. Use it to track behavior, not to claim a scan result. Your blue marks cannot see visceral fat. Your gold marks cannot prove muscle gain. But the pattern can show whether you are feeding both jobs and whether the routine survives ordinary life. Now the title question can be answered from the hardest relevant case. In people aged 55 to 70 with overweight or obesity, cutting calories alone tended to decrease muscle. Exercise preserved muscle, and mixed exercise was the only category that significantly increased it. If both modes matter in a population already close to the age in this title and already facing a body composition problem, your case is not closed by being over 60. Walking or other aerobic work leads the visceral fat task. Strength protects the muscle task. Both serves the person. That means a steadier climb from a chair and a waist moving in the intended direction can belong to the same plan. The timeline stays honest. The aerobic review studied changes across trials and identified useful weekly amounts, but it did not promise what your body will show by a particular morning. The resistance review included programs lasting at least 4 weeks. The combined trial found change over 24 weeks, and it found return to baseline after 10 months without the organized program. So look for proof of behavior first. Your minutes accumulate. Your strength work recurs. Your interrupted weeks restart. Body measurements may follow, but no source here gives me permission to promise a personal deadline. Patience is part of the protocol, because continuity is part of the cause. So, all of it in one sentence. Build toward 150 to 300 weekly minutes of repeatable, moderate to vigorous aerobic work. Keep full body resistance present at a safe dose fitted to you, and use a return rule so interruption never becomes retirement from the plan. That is the whole protocol. The boring quality is the proof. It fits on one calendar because it is built for normal weeks, not heroic ones. The first master loop is closed. Aerobic work changes the crowded room more directly. Resistance protects the shelves. Continuity keeps both jobs current. The cancelling mistake is substitution. It happens when someone completes every planned strength session and treats walking as optional, or fills every aerobic minute and treats muscle as expendable. Watch the arithmetic already in the evidence. You can reach 150 aerobic minutes and still leave strength absent. You can copy the trial pattern of 2 to 3 60-minute strength sessions and still fall outside good adherence when the plan cannot last. The app awards a check mark. The scale reports mass. Neither proves the two jobs were distributed. The corrected three-part signal is simple: move, load, return. No single part can impersonate the others. Let us walk back through what we covered. Quickly. Aerobic work had the stronger ranking for visceral fat outcomes. Resistance work still reduced fat modestly and carried the clearer muscle job. Combined work covered both sides in evidence from postmenopausal women and adults aged 55 to 70. Continuity decided whether the benefits remained part of ordinary life. If this changed your answer, comment both. That one word teaches the final lesson. Subscribe if you want careful health evidence translated without hype. I put each source under this video. Open the description anytime you want the proof. This video is for learning. If you take medication or manage a condition, loop your doctor in before trying something new. Coming up in the next video, how to build the two-job week around sore joints, travel, and low-energy days. Stick around, because the return rule only works when the routine fits the life you actually have. Today was the target. Next time is how you keep hitting it. Walking helps empty the pantry. Strength helps hold the shelves. Choose one for one job, and choose both for the whole person.